Story 1. I never thought much about closets. To me, they were just storage spaces, nothing more. But ever since that day with my daughter, I can't look at one without feeling my stomach twist. It started innocently enough. I was changing my daughter in her room, right in front of her open closet. She was giggling in that uncontrollable way kids do, eyes darting around me like she was watching something move. I thought maybe it was a shadow I was casting, or the squeak of the closet door hinge. But when I asked her what was funny, she said something that stuck in my head like a splinter. There was a man standing inside the closet. I thought she was making up an imaginary friend like kids do. I even asked about him, just out of curiosity. That's when she described him. A man with a neck like a snake. She said he waved at her, motioning her to come closer. I froze when she pointed at the closet door, her little hands steady, eyes wide, still laughing. When I turned to look, of course, there was nothing. Just rows of her tiny clothes, toys stacked in bins, and the dim light bulb above. I brushed it off, but that's when I started noticing things. She began spending more time near that closet. Sometimes I'd find her sitting right in front of it, staring in, whispering under her breath. Other times she'd be inside, playing as if someone else was in there with her. She'd laugh like she was responding to someone's joke. The weirdest part was her body language. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't performing for me. She was genuinely interacting with something I couldn't see. At first I rationalized. Kids have active imaginations. She could have overheard something from a cartoon or seen something on TV. Maybe she was copying behavior. But every night I'd catch myself watching her room from the hallway, the thin strip of light from her closet seeping out because she refused to let me close the door. It was always open, just enough. Then things escalated. One night, close to midnight, I heard her scream. It was sharp and sudden, the kind of scream that makes your heart punch your chest. I ran into her room, but her bed was empty. My stomach dropped. The closet was half open, the way she liked it. I swung the door open, but it was empty too. That moment broke me. I called out her name, checked under the bed, ran through every room. I even went outside in my bare feet, scanning the street like some desperate lunatic. Nothing. When I came back inside, I saw a faint light in the kitchen. My daughter was at the dining table, surrounded by knives she had pulled from the drawer. She was arranging them in neat little lines, smiling as if it was some kind of game. For a second I froze because her face was lit by the dim overhead bulb in a way that made her look older, sharper. Then, as if sensing me, she snapped her head toward me, all traces of a smile gone. Her expression was dead serious, her eyes strangely cold. In a voice that didn't sound like her, low, rough, too deliberate, she said that her friend didn't like me intruding on their playtime. Before I could even react, she picked up one of the knives and hurled it at me. It missed by inches, clattering against the cabinet behind me. When I looked back at her, she was gone. I tore through the house again, every nerve buzzing with fear and adrenaline. I don't remember how long I searched, but when I finally went back to her room, I found her. She was in the closet, lying half in, half out, as if she had been dragged there. The door was slightly open, her small body sprawled on the floor, her clothes smeared with bloodstains. My hands shook as I pulled her out, checking every inch of her body. But she was fine. Not a single scratch, no cuts, no bruises, nothing to explain the blood. Her breathing was soft and steady. She was asleep. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in her room, staring at the closet, feeling like it was watching me back. After that night, she never mentioned the man again. She went back to her normal self, playing with toys, watching cartoons, asking for snacks. No more staring into the closet. No more giggling at empty spaces. The only thing different was me. I can't shake the feeling that something happened that night, something I can't explain. Sometimes when I walk past her room, I feel a cool draft seep out from that closet, even when it's closed. The air seems heavier near it, like stepping into a damp basement. I hear faint creaks, like someone shifting their weight inside, even when the house is still. I've thought about researching the history of this house, but part of me doesn't want to know. I don't want to confirm what I already fear, that maybe someone once hung themselves in that closet, their necks stretched in some grotesque way that my daughter somehow sensed. Or maybe it's simpler. Maybe she saw shadows and invented a story around them, and I let my imagination run wild after a stressful night. But I keep coming back to the blood. Where did it come from? Why was she so calm when she should have been terrified? And why, in that moment at the dining table, did her voice sound like someone else was speaking through her? I try to be rational. I try to tell myself it was just a mix of exhaustion, paranoia, and the tricks a child's imagination can play. But every time I open that closet door to put away her clothes, I half expect to see a figure standing there, head tilted, neck stretched longer than it should be, smiling at me the way a predator smiles before it strikes. I haven't seen him, not yet, but sometimes when the house is quiet and my daughter's asleep, I swear I hear a faint rasping sound, like the dry, shifting scales of something moving just out of sight. I don't look anymore, because I know if I do, I might see him waving at me too. Story number 2. This happened a few years ago, and I still can't fully explain it. My son was 3 at the time, and he had always been an energetic, curious little kid. He'd chatter about the randomest things on the way home from daycare. Dinosaurs, clouds shaped like animals. Why the sun follows the car. That day, though, he was silent. Completely silent. At first, I didn't think much of it. Kids have moods, right? Maybe he was tired, but after 10 minutes of quiet, I called his name. He didn't respond. I glanced into the rearview mirror, and what I saw made my stomach twist. His mouth was hanging wide open, unnaturally wide, and his eyes weren't right. Instead of the usual big brown ones, they looked like 2 small black dots, void-like. I slammed on the brakes and pulled over, my chest pounding. When I turned to check on him, he was still breathing, but he was unresponsive. I was about to dial for an ambulance when I heard laughter. It wasn't coming from outside, and it didn't sound fully human. It was layered, high-pitched yet guttural at the same time, like 2 voices overlapping. I whipped my head back, and there he was, sitting straight, laughing like nothing was wrong. His eyes looked normal again, his mouth back to usual. He acted as if the last 30 seconds hadn't happened. I tried to brush it off as my mind playing tricks, maybe exhaustion, but the moment was too sharp, too real to ignore. I drove the rest of the way home in silence. Halfway there, out of nowhere, he piped up and asked if I remembered the scene where we died in a fire. His tone was calm, almost casual, like he was asking if I remembered buying milk. My hands froze on the steering wheel. I pulled over again, staring at him in disbelief, but he was already looking out the window like he hadn't said a thing. That was the first time. After that day, things escalated. A week later, I was in my room working late when I smelled something burning. I rushed downstairs and the kitchen was filled with smoke. The oven was on, glowing hot. My son was sitting cross-legged right in front of it, staring. The problem? The oven had been broken for a week. We'd scheduled a repair, and it hadn't even been connected to the gas line. There was no reason it should have been producing heat, let alone enough to smoke like that. I grabbed him and pulled him out, my heart hammering. I kept telling myself I must have forgotten something, maybe flipped a switch accidentally, but deep down I knew I hadn't. And the part that still unsettles me, when I rushed into the kitchen, I could have sworn I'd left him in his room upstairs. A few days later, there was a fire on the street. A light pole had sparked, flames crawling up the side of the wood. Neighbors were gathered, calling the fire department, and there, sitting calmly on the pavement near the flames, was my son. I didn't even see him leave the house. 1 second, he was playing with his toys in the living room. The next, I found him outside, much too close to the fire. I scooped him up, and he looked at me with this strange smile. Not mischievous, not innocent. Something else. I started noticing smaller things too. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and smell faint smoke, though nothing in the house was burning. I'd go from room to room, checking outlets, wires, the stove. Nothing. But the smell lingered until morning. Other nights I'd hear faint crackling, like logs snapping in a fireplace, except we didn't have one. My son would be asleep, but his hands would be warm, unnaturally warm, as if he'd been sitting by a fire. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. How do you explain something like this without sounding insane? Then came the worst night. A house 3 blocks away caught fire. It happened so suddenly that the entire neighborhood woke up to screams and sirens. I ran outside with my son, heart sinking at the sight of flames devouring the building. The family inside, they didn't make it. What froze me in place wasn't the fire, though. It was my son. He was standing in front of the burning house watching, laughing, his small shoulders shaking as if it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. And when I rushed to grab him, he turned and said, clear as day, that it was going to be our turn soon. I still can't explain any of this. Part of me tries to rationalize. Kids say strange things. Maybe I hallucinated the eyes in the car. Maybe the oven malfunctioned and I just didn't realize it. Maybe he slipped outside faster than I thought when the light pole fire happened. Maybe he didn't actually say what I thought I heard. But there are things that don't fit neatly into logic. The overlapping laughter, the warmth of his hands at night, the way fire seemed to follow him, find him, the way he spoke of dying in a fire as if it had already happened once before. For a while I lived in constant fear. I started keeping buckets of water around the house. I checked smoke alarms twice a week. I barely slept. Every time I smelled something burning, I jolted awake and tore through the house like a madman. I began to notice my son watching me too. He'd sit quietly, studying me with an expression that was too mature for his age. I'd catch him staring at the oven, the fireplace at his daycare, the candles in a neighbor's window, always staring, always silent. I told myself he was just curious, that kids are fascinated by fire, but in my gut, I knew there was more to it. Nothing has happened for years now. No fires, no strange laughter, no black eyes. My son is older, and he doesn't remember any of it. At least that's what he says when I cautiously bring it up. But sometimes I still catch him watching flames a little too intently, a candle flickering, a match being struck. His eyes seem to follow it, unblinking. And sometimes when the night is dead quiet, I think I hear that crackling sound again, that faint laughter, layered and wrong, just at the edge of hearing. I try to convince myself it's nothing, just imagination, just nerves. But deep down, there's a lingering unease I can't shake. Because whenever I close my eyes, I remember what he said that night, that it was going to be our turn. And sometimes when I wake up to the faint smell of smoke in the air, I can't help but wonder if it still is. Story number 3. Things happen. Sometimes they are planned, sometimes they are spontaneous, but whatever happened a few months ago, I don't know if I should believe in the other world or not. My daughter Lila had just turned 7. We threw her a birthday party on the lawn, balloons tied to the fence, cake on a folding table, neighbors dropping by with gifts. It was one of those afternoons where everything felt normal and happy. Kids running around with chocolate smeared on their cheeks, parents chatting about work and schools, music playing faintly from someone's speaker. There was nothing strange that day. A week later, I saw Lila in the backyard, sitting cross-legged on the grass. She was whispering something, smiling, her hands moving like she was explaining a game. I called her name, and when she looked up at me, she said she wanted to introduce me to her new friend. I scanned the yard, thinking maybe one of the neighborhood kids had wandered in, but there was no one, just her, the patchy grass, and the rustling trees. She pointed right beside her, saying her friend was standing there. At first, I laughed it off. Kids invent imaginary friends all the time, but it didn't stop there. Soon, every night at dinner, Lila would set 2 plates. If I took one away, she'd quietly put it back. When we went out, she'd carry 2 toys, carefully keeping one for him. I'd hear her whispering while brushing her teeth, giggling at empty space, sometimes even scolding thin air like she was arguing. My husband noticed too. We both told ourselves it was just a phase, but the way she did it, it wasn't playful. It was committed, too real. The moment that truly scared us happened at the park. There's a pond near the walking trail, not very deep, but still dangerous for a child who can't swim. We were sitting on a bench when I noticed Lila walking straight to the edge. She wasn't running or skipping like she usually did. She was moving with purpose. By the time we got up, she was standing on the stone lip, leaning forward like she was about to jump in. We shouted her name and she snapped out of it, startled. Later, when we asked what she was doing, she said her friend told her to join him in the water because it would be fun. That night I cracked. I scolded her, told her there was no friend, that she was worrying us. She burst into tears and locked herself in her room. When I finally went in, hours later, she was curled up on her bed with red, swollen eyes. She told me her friend was angry because I humiliated him. The house changed after that. The first night, the windows in our bedroom banged open violently, though we'd latched them tight. I checked the weather app. Calm night, no wind warnings. Still, the windows kept rattling like invisible hands were shaking them. Another evening, I was slicing fruit in the kitchen when the knife slipped and nearly cut my finger. I swear, just before it happened, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck, like someone was leaning over me. My husband walked in seconds later, and I laughed it off as me being clumsy, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. It escalated. Loud knocks on the front door in the middle of dinner, so forceful the plates rattled. I'd rush to answer, but no one would be there. Just the dark porch, empty street, and silence. Lila would quietly say it was her friend playing games. Some nights I'd wake up to faint tapping on the bedroom wall, rhythmic, like knuckles dragging slowly across plaster. Other times, toys would be moved from the shelves and arranged in neat little rows on the floor. Once her stuffed animals were lined up facing the bedroom door, as if waiting. The scariest moment for me was in the middle of the night. I'd gone to check on Lila because I thought I heard her crying. When I opened her door, she was sitting upright in bed, wide awake. She wasn't crying. She was staring into the corner of the room. When I asked what she was doing, she whispered that her friend was mad at me and wouldn't leave. I didn't sleep much after that. Then just as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. One day, Lila no longer set two plates. She no longer whispered to empty air. She stopped mentioning her friend completely, almost as if he had never existed. My husband and I didn't bring it up either, not wanting to stir things up again. Weeks passed, life slowly returned to normal. Birthday decorations came down, the windows stayed shut, and the knocking at night never returned. But every now and then, I'll feel it again. That presence. When I'm folding laundry in the living room, sometimes I'll catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye, like a shadow slipping behind the couch. Or while washing dishes, I'll feel a chill in my back, like someone is watching me from the doorway. I'll turn around, and of course, nothing's there. Once, when I tucked Lila into bed, I kissed her forehead and turned to leave. Just as I switched off the light, I could have sworn I saw another small shadow lying next to her under the covers, facing me. When I blinked, it was gone. She was alone. It's been quiet for months now, but I can't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a child's imagination. Still, I keep telling myself it had to be. Kids make things up, houses make noises, shadows play tricks. But late at night, when the house is silent and I'm lying in bed, I sometimes hear faint footsteps in the hallway. Slow, dragging steps. They stop right outside our bedroom door. And every time I hold my breath, listening, waiting for the handle to turn, it never does. But I know I'm not imagining it. Story number 4. Last winter, something started in my house, and there is no logical explanation for it. I've gone back and forth between telling myself it was nothing more than nerves and winter wildlife, and then remembering details that make me doubt myself all over again. I've tried to convince myself it wasn't what it felt like, but the truth is, I still sleep with the hallway light on some nights. It began with my daughter, Ellie. She was 5 at the time, and up until then, she'd never paid any attention to our attic. It's one of those pull-down ladder types with creaky wooden steps that lead into a low, dusty space under the roof. Mostly, we just kept old holiday boxes and some baby furniture up there. But that winter, she suddenly became obsessed with it. Every day, she asked if she could play there. She begged at breakfast, again after school, again before bed. At first, we said no. She was too little, and I didn't want her near all that dust and insulation. But after nearly a week of relentless pleading, I caved. I figured I'd let her sit at the bottom of the stairs while I went up to reorganize the Christmas boxes. She brought her sketchbook with her and plopped herself down, unusually calm. Normally, Ellie hums when she colors, little tunes to herself. But that day she went completely quiet. Her pencil scratched hard against the page. She didn't even look up when I dragged the bins around. When I finally asked what she was drawing, she held it up. The picture made my stomach clench. It was just stick figures, but clear enough. A little girl with pigtails. Her. Next to her was a tall, dark figure, its head smudged into streaks as if she couldn't decide how to finish it. Around their legs, she'd drawn dozens of tiny black dots. She said they were eyes. When I asked who they were supposed to be, she told me, completely straight, that it was her and the lady who wanted her to come upstairs at night. I laughed nervously, because what else could I do? But that night, while lying in bed, I heard scratching above Ellie's room. A light, frantic scratching, followed by a shuffle, like something dragging itself over the attic floorboards. I told myself it was probably mice. Still, I barely slept. Over the next week, the noises continued, always after midnight, always above Ellie's room. One night, I got up to go to the bathroom, and that's when I saw it. The hallway was dimly lit by the nightlight we kept plugged in. Just as I stepped out, something moved at the edge of my vision. A woman, thin, her hair hanging down, dragging a 4-foot teddy bear that Ellie had adored since she was a baby. She pulled it slowly along the hallway floor and then up the attic stairs. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. I forced myself to flick on the lights, ready to scream, ready to chase whoever it was. But the second the bulb flickered on, the hallway was empty. The attic ladder was shut tight. When I went to check the attic, there was nothing. Dust undisturbed, boxes exactly where I'd left them. But the teddy bear, Ellie's favorite, was gone. The next morning I asked Ellie about it casually, not wanting to scare her. She told me the lady had visited her in the night. She said the lady had asked her to come with her, but Ellie refused. So the lady asked if she could take something instead. Ellie told her she could have the teddy bear. She said it so matter-of-factly, as if it was the most normal conversation in the world. That's when I made my husband change the lock on the attic door. We told Ellie the attic was off limits from then on. She didn't argue, which scared me more than if she had. It was like she already knew the lady wasn't going to leave. For a while, things quieted down. Weeks went by without incident, and I convinced myself the whole thing was either a dream or some weird half-asleep moment. Maybe I'd walked into the hallway groggy and imagined the woman. Maybe Ellie hid her teddy bear somewhere and forgot. Maybe. But then the stormy nights came. Whenever rain hammered on the roof or wind rattled the house, the noises returned. Bumps, dragging sounds, faint thuds, always above Ellie's room. Sometimes, if I strained hard enough, I swore I could hear whispering. Not words exactly, more like a low murmur that seemed to rise and fall with the gusts of wind. Ellie would complain those nights too. She'd tell me the lady was lonely now. She'd say it as if it explained the noises, as if she felt sorry for her. One time I went up during the day just to prove to myself it was empty. Everything was in place, dusty and untouched. But when I turned to climb down, I noticed faint markings near the far wall. Dozens of small smudges, shaped vaguely like fingerprints, scattered in patterns too messy to make sense. I rubbed at them with my sleeve, but they didn't come off. I told myself it could have been soot or something blown in through the vent. Still, I stopped going up there. A few weeks later, I was folding laundry in the living room when Ellie patted in with her sketchbook. She sat quietly at the coffee table, drawing as usual. When she was done, she slid the page over to me. This time, the picture was just the attic ladder. At the top, she'd drawn a dark shape leaning down, stretching a long arm as though reaching. And at the bottom of the ladder was a tiny stick figure, her looking up. The worst part was the detail. She'd drawn dozens of little black eyes again, this time scattered all over the attic floor. Watching, waiting. I didn't ask her who they were supposed to be. Now, nearly a year later, the attic stays locked, but I still hear bumps sometimes. Always when the weather turns. The noises don't stop until the wind dies down. And sometimes Ellie will glance at the ceiling and smile faintly, like she's listening to something I can't hear. I keep telling myself it's animals. Raccoons maybe, or squirrels. Houses make noises in storms. Kids have wild imaginations. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that we let something in that winter. That by allowing Ellie to sit at the foot of those stairs, we opened some kind of door we shouldn't have. I don't know what the lady wants, and I don't want to find out. All I know is the teddy bear never came back, and sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet and I'm lying awake, I think I hear fabric dragging slowly across the floorboards above me. Could be raccoons, I guess, but the thought doesn't help me sleep. Story number 5. I never thought I'd be the type of parent writing something like this online, but the whole thing still knots my stomach whenever I think about it. I don't really believe in ghosts, and I've always been the practical, skeptical type. Yet what happened with my son a couple of years back has stayed with me. It started 3 weeks after his 3rd birthday. Out of nowhere, he developed this habit of picking up random little things. Not toys, not even things you'd expect a toddler to care about. He'd find broken buttons, tiny pebbles, twigs with odd shapes, and once even a bit of glass worn smooth at the edges. He wasn't just hoarding them. He'd place them carefully beneath his bedroom window in neat, ruler-straight rows. At first, I thought it was just a weird toddler phase. Kids get obsessed with things, right? My wife joked it was like he was a little crow, collecting shiny objects. But what unnerved me was the way he got protective of them. If we tried to clear them away, because honestly, some of it was trash, he'd lose his mind. Full-blown tantrums, screaming that the collectors would be angry. That word stuck with me. The collectors. We never taught him that word. He barely even knew how to use collector in the sense of someone who gathers stamps or coins. Yet he said it with this strange seriousness, like he wasn't just parroting it from a cartoon. For a while, we humored him. We left the rows of objects where they were. But one morning, I walked into his room and froze. The floor wasn't just lined with trinkets anymore. Every rock, button, twig, and scrap was arranged in a spiral. It covered half his bedroom floor, curling tighter and tighter into the center. Here's the part that still gives me chills. There's no way my son could have done that on his own. Not the size, not the precision. It was perfect, like something you'd see carved into an old stone or drawn with a compass, and it appeared overnight. I checked the window, locked from the inside. The door? Same. There were no signs of anyone breaking in, and yet this enormous spiral was laid out across his floor as though someone, or something, had spent hours carefully arranging it. When I asked him about it, he looked almost calm. He said without hesitation that the collectors had done it. Then he added, almost like it was the most normal thing in the world, that they could walk through walls. That was the first time I felt something like real fear about it. I didn't say anything to him, didn't want to feed into his imagination, but I set up a baby monitor in his room that same night. The footage I got didn't make me feel any better. He wasn't moving around, making spirals or sneaking out of bed. He just sat upright, bolt straight, staring toward the window. His eyes were wide open, and he was murmuring in this soft, steady voice. I replayed the audio a dozen times, and the only clear words I could make out were, "Thank you for the presents." The next night it was the same. Him sitting upright, whispering, eyes wide open. He didn't look asleep, but he wasn't really awake either. I thought about getting rid of the objects completely, but something in me hesitated. The tantrums had been bad enough before. I was scared of what might happen if I threw them out for good, so I left them. I just kept checking the footage night after night and tried to tell myself it was some kind of sleepwalking or night terror thing. Then just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. No more rows, no more spirals, no more whispered thanks in the night. One morning I came in and his floor was clear. He seemed lighter somehow, like a weight had lifted. When I asked him if he wanted to collect more presents, he shook his head and said the collectors had finished. He never mentioned them again. You'd think that would be the end of it, but the room didn't feel right afterward. For months, it was like the air in there was different. Heavy, cold, charged. I'd tuck him in and find myself glancing at the walls, half expecting to see something there, some outline or movement where there shouldn't be. The monitor would glitch sometimes too, but only in his room. Static, warping, once even freezing on an image that didn't look quite like him, though I might have been imagining that. Friends told me it was just me psyching myself out, that kids go through phases, and maybe my son was just acting out because of something he overheard or saw on TV. But no explanation I've heard accounts for that spiral, or why the objects stopped all at once, or why my son seemed so relieved, almost like a deal had been completed. There's one more thing I should mention, though I've never said it out loud until now. Months later, when I finally felt safe enough to pack away the baby monitor, I scrolled through some old recordings before deleting them, On one of them, just one, I swear I heard another sound in the background. Not his voice. Lower. A murmur, almost like someone answering him. I keep telling myself it was just interference. A radio frequency. A neighbor's voice bleeding through the signal. Something explainable. But even now, years later, when I pass his old room at night, I can't help but listen closely to the walls. Like maybe I'll hear that low murmur again. I never did find out who or what the collectors were. But sometimes when I'm walking outside and see a rock with a hole in it, or a twig twisted into a strange shape, I feel this strange tug of recognition. I never pick them up. I leave them where they are, just in case they weren't meant for me. Story number 6. I've lived with allergies my whole life. Nuts, specifically. A single bite could send me into anaphylaxis. Doctors had warned me during my pregnancy that my allergy might complicate things, maybe even affect the baby. Somehow my pregnancy went smoothly. My daughter was born perfectly healthy, and for 4 years everything was normal. Or at least I thought it was. It started on vacation. We had gone to a small hill station, rented a quiet little cottage that overlooked a valley. The first night, as I was changing my daughter into her pajamas, I noticed a small bruise on her thigh. I brushed it off as her bumping into furniture. But the next day there were more. Thin scratches along her arms, almost like paper cuts. By the third morning, I saw a deep mark near her collarbone. When I rushed to get antiseptic, the mark faded right before my eyes. 1 second it was raw and red. The next it was like it had never been there. I told myself I was exhausted, maybe even imagining things. My husband didn't notice, or maybe he didn't want to. Midway through the trip, I was alone with my daughter in the cottage. My husband had stepped out to get groceries. She wandered into the room with a piece of chocolate, smiling like she was proud she found it. I should have known better. I've never let her bring me food without checking, but it was just a small square, and I was distracted. The second it touched my tongue, my chest tightened. My throat burned, my skin itched like fire ants were crawling all over me. I felt my face swell, my vision blur. And in that moment, as I gasped for air, my daughter stared at me in a way I'd never seen before. It wasn't fear or confusion. It was expectation. Almost like she was waiting for the reaction, like she wanted to see what would happen. For a split second, I swear her eyes glowed red, a sharp glimmer in the dim light. Then my husband walked in. Everything blurred after that. Sirens, hospital lights, the doctor telling me I'd ingested nuts. I survived, but the thought of how easily I could have died clung to me. When we returned home, I couldn't stop watching her. Every small habit felt loaded with meaning. The way she sometimes stared at me for too long. The times she hummed to herself in the middle of the night, even though she'd never been the type to wake up. One night around 4 a.m., I woke suddenly. No dream, no noise. Just the unmistakable feeling of someone standing near me. I opened my eyes and there she was, my daughter inches from my face. Her eyes were wide open, reflecting the faint light from the street lamp outside. For the briefest moment, I saw that same unnatural red glow again. In her tiny hands, she was holding a vegetable peeler. Her head tilted, and in a whispery voice I almost didn't hear, she asked if she could peel my skin. My heart froze. My body locked in place. I don't even know if I was awake or trapped in some vivid sleep paralysis. Because the next moment, I jolted upright in bed, sweating and gasping. The room was empty. My daughter was asleep in her own bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Peaceful, innocent. I told myself it had to be a dream, a side effect of the allergy medication maybe. But I checked her hands the next morning, and the peeler was on the floor beside her bed. Since then, small things keep happening, things I can't fully explain. Sometimes when I pass by her room, I catch her whispering, but when I open the door, she's fast asleep. Sometimes I find long strands of hair, my hair, braided neatly under her pillow, even though I never let her touch scissors. Once I found her sitting at the kitchen table at midnight, staring at the wall. When I asked her what she was doing, she blinked, confused, and said she didn't remember getting out of bed. The bruises still appear. I've seen her skin welt as if something sharp dragged across it, then vanish when I try to show anyone else. I've even questioned if maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm hallucinating. Maybe this is all stress manifesting in strange ways. Allergic reactions, lack of sleep, too much anxiety. There's always an explanation if I force myself to find one. But then I think about the way she looked at me with that chocolate, like she knew exactly what would happen. The other day, I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables when I felt someone behind me. I turned and she was there, just watching. No expression, just staring. Then she smiled, but it wasn't her usual childish smile. It was slow, too slow, almost deliberate. I blinked and she was back to normal, asking if she could have a snack. I haven't told my husband everything. He thinks I'm still shaken from the allergic reaction. And maybe he's right. Maybe all of this is just me unraveling. But deep down, there's this gnawing dread I can't shake. A few nights ago, I woke up again around 4 a.m. My chest was heavy, like someone was pressing down on it. I opened my eyes and for a split second, I saw her crouched on my chest, her face close to mine, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Then the light from a passing car swept through the room, and she was gone. She was asleep in her bed when I checked, just like always. I keep asking myself if I'm losing my mind or if there's something wrong with her. I don't know which answer is worse. What I do know is that every time I close my eyes, I half expect to wake up with her standing there again, holding something sharp, asking for my skin. And I don't know how many more times I can convince myself it's just a dream. Story number 7. I never share my personal life with anyone, not even with my friends. But when things which doesn't make sense and are out of your control happen, you seek answers. Any answer that would regain your sanity and beliefs before it messes with your head makes you go completely insane. I've tried to rationalize it in every way I can, but some things just don't add up. I don't know if writing it out will help or just make it worse, but it started on a Saturday afternoon. It was just me and my 12-year-old daughter at home. My husband was working overtime, and our dog was lazing around in the living room. Nothing unusual, just one of those lazy weekends. Then my daughter came to me, pale and trembling, saying she thought she saw someone in the bathroom. She said when she walked past, it looked like someone ducked into the shower. The way she said it, almost whispering, gave me goosebumps. It wasn't just the words. It was the way her eyes looked, wide, like she'd really seen something. I knew the house was locked, and it was broad daylight. Still, my heart started racing. I didn't want to scare her more, but my own adrenaline was pumping. I called the dog and had him follow me down the hallway. The air felt weirdly heavy the closer I got to the bathroom, like the temperature had dropped. I stopped a few feet from the door, pointed to the bathroom, and let the dog go in first. He sniffed around, tail low, moving carefully. He went behind the curtain, under the sink, everywhere. Nothing. Just a normal bathroom. I exhaled in relief, almost embarrassed for letting my nerves get the best of me. I turned to reassure my daughter, but she wasn't there. At first, I thought she'd gone back to her room. I called out for her, checked the kitchen, the living room, upstairs. Nothing. Her shoes were still by the door. Well, at least I thought both were. Panic started creeping in, that raw kind that doesn't let you think straight. I started calling her friends, even neighbors. No one had seen her. I ended up running to the backyard. That's when I saw it. Her shoe. Just one, half buried in the grass like someone had tried to stomp it down. I picked it up, my hands shaking so bad I nearly dropped it. The ground around it felt damp, like freshly watered soil, even though it hadn't rained in days. I don't know what possessed me, but I started digging. At first with my hands, then with a trowel we kept near the flower bed. The dirt gave way too easily, like it had already been disturbed. A few minutes in, I saw fabric, then more, then pale skin. It was her, my daughter. I froze, my brain refusing to process what I was looking at. She was curled up, her hair matted with dirt, her clothes smelling like rot, like roadkill in the summer sun. My heart nearly stopped. Then she blinked. She was alive. I dragged her out, crying so hard I could barely breathe. She looked pale, weak, and so much skinnier than she had just an hour before. Her lips were bluish, her fingers cold. She clung to me but couldn't explain a thing. She had no idea how she got there. I wanted to take her straight to the hospital, but after a while, she started to look more like herself. just exhausted. She begged not to go, said she just wanted to be home. Against my better judgment, I let her rest. I told myself maybe she fainted, maybe she wandered into the yard and collapsed, and my panicked brain exaggerated the rest. I tried to convince myself that was the logical explanation, but the smell, her clothes reeked of something rotten. Not dirt, not sweat, not anything I could place. For weeks after that, she was different. She'd wake up screaming in the middle of the night, clutching her throat like she was being strangled. Sometimes I'd hear her gasping before I even reached her room. The dog started sleeping outside her door, whining at odd hours. She grew quiet, withdrawn, always tired. Her appetite was gone, and sometimes I'd find clumps of her hair on her pillow. I told myself it was stress, maybe trauma from fainting and getting buried under dirt somehow. Maybe she did it to herself, though that thought was unbearable. Then came the other things. I'd be folding laundry and hear the shower running, even though no one was in there. I'd walk past her room and hear muffled sounds like whispering, but when I opened the door, she'd be fast asleep. Once I woke up to the dog barking at the bathroom door. He wouldn't stop growling, his hackles raised, but when I opened it, the room was empty. The mirror was fogged though, like someone had just stepped out of a hot shower. Another time I was cooking and felt a tug on my shirt, like a child pulling for attention. I turned expecting her, but no one was there. The dog was in the corner, staring at me with ears flat. I never saw anyone, but I always felt it. A presence, always hovering near the bathroom, near the hallway. Sometimes in the backyard when I watered the plants, the soil looked darker in patches, like something was buried there again. My daughter eventually recovered. The night terrors faded, the pale look went away, and her weight came back. She doesn't talk about that day though. If I bring it up, she shuts down completely. I still wonder if I imagined it all in a panic. Maybe she fainted. Maybe I pulled her out of the dirt but exaggerated the rest in my mind. Maybe the smell was just my fear making things seem worse. People bury their own memories when they're scared, right? But here's what keeps me awake. Every so often when I'm alone in the house, I'll hear the floorboards creak like someone ducked into the bathroom. I'll smell that same faint rot drifting down the hallway. The dog still growls at the shower some nights. And in the backyard, no matter how many times I reseed and water it, there's one patch of soil that never grows grass. It always looks freshly turned, damp even in the middle of summer. I tell myself it's nothing. I tell myself it's just bad drainage, an overactive imagination, leftover stress. But sometimes when I'm out there alone, I swear I hear scratching beneath the dirt.